Welcome to another episode of the Race Relations Podcast. On today's episode, I sit down with a teacher to talk about education. We have to face the hard reality that we have been teaching racism in our educational system since the beginning of America's conception. It is time to change that. This teacher is now in a program that is trying to fight against racist ideology and teach us how to properly teach our children to be anti-racist. She shares her particular story, bringing us trauma from her own childhood of facing racism, and how, as a society, through this program, teachers are aimed to fighting against racism and spread awareness. Let's take a look. Welcome to another episode on the Race Relations Podcast. I'm your host, Caleb Sinclair. Today, we're going to sit down with a teacher by the name of Evanni Roberson and talk about education. Education today is a big problem with systemic racism. And Ebony just finished her program and is going to give us the facts and the details about what it looks like to be in a program that's based on anti-racist. Ebony, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm super excited to be here. Like you said, systemic racism, in my opinion, it starts with the education system, and that's exactly why I'm a teacher. Education is the first system that kids come in contact with. And as much as I can interject and, counter these white supremacy norms that these kids are coming into school with as an educator, like as much as I can do that, I will. And to me, that's what's gonna, it's so cliche, but that's what's gonna change the world.
Right.
Education is the basis of everything. If we didn't have education, we would have nothing, so.
Yeah, before we get too far into that, give us a little bit about your own upbringing. What was education like for you? What kind of led to you wanting to be a teacher?
Yeah, so I'm from Puyallup, which is, 45 minutes south of Mount Lake Terrace, where we're at right now. I always describe my educational experience. I think that's how you'd say it. I always explain it as just super average. It's funny, I just wrote about this in an assignment yesterday about my experience in K-12, and it was really average. I never really had a teacher that I remember being really impactful. I just was whatever, I just kind of went through the motions, and thank God I was a good student naturally, because I could have been another statistic if I wasn't, just because I fell through the cracks because I didn't have an adult, a teacher more specifically, that had an impact on my life. If I didn't show up to school one day, I don't really think anybody would miss me. You know what I mean? And but anyway, in terms of my experience more specifically, I'm from Puyallup, which is predominantly white. I had a core friend group of about 10 girls, and there was one other girl of color. So that's 20% of us. And just because of that, I experienced a lot of microaggressions. That is the root of my issues. It's microaggressions, and I laugh now because I feel like I've come a long way, but I'm still dealing with those demons. And
break those down for me really quick.
Yeah.
Microaggressions for you.
Yeah. So microaggressions are they're super implicit, right? It's racism that you don't know is racism. Not me. I know as a black woman, when you tell me I'm pretty for a black girl, that's a microaggression, right? What do you mean I'm pretty for a black girl? I'm just beautiful. It doesn't matter. You don't need to add that last half on there, right? Or people would tell me, oh, you don't smell like a black person. Okay, well, what does that mean? What does that mean, right? These are things I heard on the regular. Trying to think of other examples. Oh, one time as black women, our hair is a huge thing. And I struggled with my hair all the time. I just wanted white girl hair. That's all I wanted, because all my friends are white. I wanted to be able to wake up in the morning, blow dry my hair, excuse me, straighten my hair in 20 minutes and go to school and have all these boys be like, oh my God, you're so pretty, right? That wasn't it for me. That wasn't. So I straightened my hair. My hair was extremely damaged coming out of high school. Anyway, but it takes a lot. With that being said, it takes a lot. And so one day I came to school, I was in 7th grade, middle school, super impressionable, crazy. And it took me a lot to wear my natural hair to school. the second I walked in the door, this kid that I thought was my friend looked at me and he goes, "Oh, you wore your black girl hair to school today." That's a microaggression. He didn't even think of that. He thought that was a totally normal thing to say to me. What did I do? I immediately went to the bathroom and I put my hair up. That's what I did, right? So that's what I experienced from the 4th grade to the 12th grade. And to white people, to put it blatantly, it seems like a simple comment. And even if I had the courage to go up to them and be like, "Look, this affected me. I didn't like what you said," right? I would have been met with, "Oh, it was just a joke. I didn't mean it," right? But like what people don't understand is that adds up.
Yeah.
I came out of school super insecure. I have anxiety, social anxiety, because of these things that have added up for so many years. And it takes a long time to undo that. I'm still undoing that. And I'm a year out of undergrad now. And I feel like I'm just now coming to the fact that, no, I am beautiful. It doesn't matter what I look like. I'm beautiful. And, I have my days, right? I have my days where I'm insecure, I'm anxious. I wake up and have a full-blown anxiety attack because of the world around me. But it's a work in progress. That's why I'm sitting here. That's why I'm an educator. So long-winded answer, but that was my experience growing up. And I was really fortunate to go to the University of Washington and be able to put names to what I was feeling. I didn't know what a microaggression was until I came to school. And, I kept taking these classes and I was like, I'm not crazy. I'm not crazy. These people are in the wrong. To put it blatantly, like, they're in the wrong. It's not me. It's them. And I just needed to be able to put names to what I was feeling, and that's why I want to be an educator, because we have to be able to do that sooner.
Right. I mean, that's sounds like a very intense childhood. I mean, I had somewhat of the same upbringing myself, but obviously you had a little bit different, being a woman in America.
Yeah.
The switch from teaching kids these microaggressions, and then obviously not having them been taught that for a long time, is that part of like the program?
Yeah, it is part of the program. I would say it's more of a general idea, right? I'm a big advocate for social emotional learning, and that's gonna be the basis, right? If I tell kids how to, or not tell, if I teach kids how to identify their emotions, what they're feeling, that's putting a name to a feeling, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be a microaggression or, this is racism, this is not. It's just more of a general thing. I'm trying to empower kids to understand their emotions. And when you understand your emotions, okay, what's the next step? What are we gonna do with those emotions? That's something I never had. And that's part of the reason why I have anxiety now, and I'm unlearning that. But if you empower kids to do that, they'll start applying those concepts to other aspects of their life. They'll start applying it to, okay, well, this is sexism. You just said something to me that I didn't like. This is what I'm feeling, and you'll be able to advocate for yourself, right? If it's sexism, racism, whatever. That's the basis. It's not, we do talk about these things. That's part of it too. But if I can give them more general strategies to combat these isms in life, they'll be more successful.
Yeah, I think that's powerful. I think that's really, really powerful. Just building a foundation of that social emotional learning is really necessary for kids. Tell me a little bit about what you learned historically with racism. What was your kind of arc of what America was founded upon, and what would that look like for you?
That's a loaded question. So in no means am I like a historian, professional, right? Like I am master's student, about to graduate. I'll be teaching 3rd grade next year, but I did learn a lot about that in undergrad. It's so complex, I don't even know where to start.
Yeah.
I guess I'll start with my perception before I came to school and what it is now. Tying it back to education, I also believe one of the biggest flaws in our education system is we don't teach history correctly. We don't, right? So when I was in school, this is what I thought. We had slavery. We thought that was bad, ironically, that was bad. We had slavery. We had Jim Crow, and now we're here. That's essentially what we teach in school. So where are those gaps? Because that's not really how it happens. For a long time, that was my perception of history. I'm like, and that's why I felt so crazy. I literally felt crazy. I would come to school and I would tell myself, look, like, we're not in these times anymore. Like, is racism actually a thing? Is that actually a thing?
Yeah.
And it's because of those gaps, right? So then I went to the U, and I learned about those gaps, right? And I learned about the nuances of what racism actually is and how deeply entrenched it is in our society. So, here's the biggest thing. You can change laws, but you can't change people's minds.
Yeah, spoken truly.
That's the issue, right? I can sit here and talk about redlining and the education system and how messed up it is, right? But like, if you just come back to that idea, you can change laws, but you can't change people's minds. That's it. That's history.
Yeah.
That fills in those gaps that we're missing, right? I don't know if I'm answering your question, but that's really it. I mean, to me, one of the biggest historical mistakes that we're still feeling the repercussions of is redlining. I can talk about that, right? Where, you had after, actually, I don't know the precise dates, but there was a time in our history where obviously people of color could not buy houses, right? They would redline these districts off where, okay, white people can live here, black people can live there, don't cross these lines, right? That has skewed our education system so much because where you go to school is based off where you live. So once you start manipulating where you can live, you're manipulating the education system. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if we have, and that's why you see predominantly kids of color in these inner cities, right? Because we've redlined them saying, if you're black, this is where you can live and this is where you can go to school. Okay, so once you've determined where I can go to school, you also get to determine where my resources are coming from because schools are funded off property taxes. So if you've redlined these, I mean, they'd call them ghettos, right? In quotes, ghettos. You've redlined people that look like me to these areas, and then you're depriving me of resources. How can you educate kids sufficiently when they don't have books, right? And this is stuff we still see today. And that's the thing. That's what I'm talking about, filling these gaps. Because people be like, oh, well, that's not the case today, blah, blah, blah. Well, you're right. But I still feel those effects, right? You've deprived people that look like me of resources for so long that I'm not even starting at the start line, right? I'm starting like 10 laps behind you. And my mom, she works in real estate right now. And she looks at these deeds of houses. They still, in the clause, they still say like black people can't buy here. Obviously it's not in effect anymore, but these are still written in these deeds of houses. So you can't sit here and tell me like it's done, right? It's not a thing anymore. Well, it is. It is, because you can go down to downtown Seattle, look on the street. Who's sitting on the street? It's not white people usually, right? Or you can walk into any of those schools, walk into my school. I have like 5 white kids in a class of 24. And I work in South Seattle. You can't tell me this isn't alive and well.
Yeah. I mean, I think you really hit on something that's important. I think the normalization of the United States not being racist after civil rights. You get to write, the legislation, black people can come back into schools or come into schools for the first place, integrate into schools and different institutions, and then all of a sudden we kind of wipe our hands and we're clean and we can go, right? But this isn't the way that we've been conditioned, and white society in particular has been conditioned over the years. There is still that segregation of mind, which is really what, talking about the social emotional learning, and then when it comes to like the deficiencies in redlining and these different legislations, again, like these things are still permeating into society, creating, the big valleys that you see in the world today. I think my question would be, kind of give us a glimpse into your program in particular. Like, what makes your program special? What attracted you to this particular program?
Yeah, so I am a Seattle teacher resident. My program is Seattle Teacher Residency. So essentially I'm in a cohort of 30, and we have been student teaching a year. That is the number one thing that attracted me to this program, because none of the stuff that I'm talking about can happen unless I'm building relationships with a kid. So a typical teacher education program, you take classes, you learn about theories, right? And then you student teach for 6 weeks. So essentially you're coming into a class in the spring.
That's quick.
Yeah, it's quick. And you're coming into a class in the spring, and I don't know any of these kids. And I can go into teaching theories, whatever, but like also the basis of classroom management, if you want kids to listen to you, have to build relationships. And to me, that was virtually impossible if I went the traditional route of the 6-week student teaching program. So that's what attracted me to SDR and their focus on, anti-racist teaching. My program is not perfect. My professors are not perfect. I appreciate the fact that they try to bring in professors of color. But then it gets a little disorganized because not everybody's on the same page, but the intention's there. And that's another thing that attracted me to this program. I wouldn't be going into education if I wasn't trying to reverse the roles we see of white supremacy in society. But the biggest thing is that I've been a quote student teacher for a year, and essentially now I'm a co-teacher. And that's another thing that is huge in combating racism, right? Like, you have to prepare your teachers to be sufficient teachers.
Right.
If you don't prepare your teachers and intentionally tell them how to be culturally responsive in their classrooms, then it doesn't matter. Why am I here? Why are you in the classroom? That's another thing that attracted me to this program. I know that I'm getting the education I need to go out and then educate the youth of America. Because I'm getting this experience for a whole year under an experienced teacher. My mentor has been teaching for 16 years, woman of color, like she's been through it. So I would say, those are the things that ultimately attracted me to this program. I also did undergrad at UW, and this program's through UW as well. So I had a good setup there. But the year experience of teaching with kids, you can't get that anywhere else.
Yeah.
And you don't have anything if you don't have relationships with these kids. Like, I love my kids to death. Like, I cry thinking about leaving them next year, and that's how it should be. If you're not crying thinking about leaving your kids, it doesn't matter what type of class you have, get out of this profession.
Yeah, you're building that real rapport with the children.
Absolutely.
To be able to change their foundational structure, for positive good. Give me a little bit of the actual curriculum. Like, what does the curriculum look like if I'm going to be an anti-racist program? What is the curriculum that you're learning about?
So I guess I could give a little background on curriculum standards. So I would get these mixed up in undergrad. I've always known I want to be a teacher. I'm like, curriculum standards, I use them interchangeably. And I came to school, I'm like, that's not the same thing. So what you have is these standards that everybody in the nation needs to hit, right? They're Common Core standards. And then you have curriculum, and that helps you teach to the standards. That is where things get crazy because everybody's teaching a different curriculum. A lot of schools, you decide, okay, this is our math curriculum. Seattle uses, it's called the CCC. I don't really need to get into those terms, but for ELA, we use the CCC, okay? That's one of the main points of my program is teaching me how to manipulate that curriculum so I can make it culturally responsive. Because when you get these curriculums, when you get this box of curricular materials, they have, and this is another example of how entrenched we are in white supremacy. It is just weaved into the fabrics of this nation, because when you get this curriculum, they have to write it with kids in mind. Okay, well, what kid are you writing this with in mind? Little white kids, right? My kids are not white. My kids are not white. They're not from America. They're that's it. So as a teacher, then that responsibility falls on me because we have incompetent curriculum makers. I don't even know what they are, right? And I'm sure I shouldn't say that. But here's the thing, these people aren't writing with my kids in mind. So now I have to be able to manipulate the curriculum with my kids in mind. So
you're doing extra work, it sounds like.
Absolutely. It's not a joke. It's not a joke when people say, teachers work so hard. No, we do. We work hard. And thank God my mentor is a godsend. I love her to death. And, we split the work evenly because if I didn't have her, I would be burnt out. But anyway, so my program teaches me how to manipulate the curriculum to fit my kids, right?
What does that look like?
it looks like me getting to school way too early and looking at this lesson plan, and just, it could be as simple as changing the names, right? And if I have a math problem and it's like, oh, Susie Q has 5 cookies, she wants 2 more. Like, no, I'll change it to a kid in my class, right? And I remember me as a kid, that was something that made me feel special. I'm like, oh, I'm in this math problem today. You know what I mean? And that's a very, very basic example. Basic. But it's as simple as that. How can I make a kid feel special today? I actually did this the other day. I don't know, we were doing math. I teach 5th grade right now. My kids hate math. They hate it. So I'm like, okay, how do I get them to just be with me for this hour block, right? And I have this kid who, he blurts out a lot, right? It takes me a lot to get him to focus. So I was like, you know what? It's going to be about him today. It's going to be about him. And all the math problems had the same name. So I was like, all right, bud, it's all about you today. And his face just lit up. Like, it's so silly, but it's those little things. How can I manipulate the curriculum? Okay, I can change a name here. Same with vocabulary. I do that all the time with vocabulary because they want to, I don't know. I mean, they try to integrate different, whatever. I'm going off on a tangent now, but it's as simple as that, right? Or you could get more complex. I've learned how to do math talks, mental math talks, right? Like, not just sitting and talking at the kids, but how can I get you involved in the content I'm trying to teach you? Come to the carpet and I'll put a problem on the board and I said, figure it out, right? No instruction, no nothing, because then it's culturally responsive because they're using their own processes in their brain to figure out this problem, right? Whether it's right or wrong, then I can have you share out and I have an insight into what you're thinking. And then I can tailor my instruction to how you're thinking about this problem. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it gets them more integrated into the actual like problem.
Right.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It does seem more, you really are laying the seeds in the field, you know, getting that foundation built up. I really like that. I didn't think it was like that specific, but that breakdown is really helpful. Yeah. Tell me a little bit about the demographics of the teachers in your actual cohort.
Yeah, so that's another thing STR tries to do, right? We try to bring in people, they try to bring in people of color. But the fact of the matter is we just don't have a lot of people of color in general in America. So my cohort is predominantly white, but I think I'm one of 3 Black women in the cohort. Who else? We have a couple Latinx, right? But it is a majority white. But we also have a small cohort. So that's that, really. It's nothing special, really.
I'm interested in like does the technique and the strategy change for teachers that are white and trying to like go in and be effective like anti-racist teachers? Yes. Like tell me a little bit about that breakdown. Yeah.
We actually struggle a little bit. I've noticed that the white people in my cohort struggle with this because as a white person, you do have to work a little harder, right? You didn't experience what I experienced in school. I innately have that knowledge because I lived it, right? Along with everybody else of color in my cohort. So as a white teacher, you have to really be intentional about how you're showing up in a classroom. You have to know about your positionality, right? How are my students seeing me, not only in this classroom, but how are they seeing me in the context of society? That's positionality. Because that's another thing that gets lost is kids don't come to school and they forget about everything else outside. That's not how it works, right? Kids are bringing everything outside of school into school. That's just, that's the fact of the matter. And like, we like to, for some reason, compartmentalize all of that. Like, no, you are bringing in your life, and so am I as a teacher. So if you're white, you're bringing in yourself in the context of the greater society into this classroom, and your kids will know that. Kids are way, way smarter than people think. So yeah, I mean, long story short, they have to work harder. They actually have to think about how they're being perceived by their kids. And that's in the context of society, right? It doesn't matter. You could be the most nice, foo-foo, fluff, anti-racist teacher, but it doesn't matter. If your kid is out in the streets and they're nervous that they're gonna be shot on sight, right, or ostracized by a white person, you fit that profile. Just like they wanna tell us we fit a profile, so do you as a white person. So you have to be intentional about showing up knowing that that's how your kids are potentially going to see you.
Yeah.
You got to tailor your instruction. It's not even tailoring your instruction. It's you making sure you're building genuine relationships with these kids. And you're letting them know, yes, I'm white. I know how you see me in the context of society, but look, I'm going to work hard for you to change the world. Because it's, I could go on, but it's not on people of color. It's not on my kids of color to change the world. It's not on you or I. I can't fix a system I didn't create. So you, as a white teacher, you have to let your kids know that you're gonna right the wrongs of their ancestors, and that's how you have to show up every day as a white educator.
I mean, demographically speaking, you're gonna have, like you said, more white teachers. Mm-hmm. So I mean, the burden of that is absolutely there.
Yeah.
On them. I think that's really perceptive. Yeah. Tell me a little bit about when you were in school when George Floyd was murdered.
Yeah.
How did that affect the white teachers in the program? How did your program kind of grapple with the immensity of the problem that arose out of that? And when I say problem, I mean just, again, identifying this is a huge systemic issue with police brutality and the murder of an innocent man.
Yeah, no, I think that's one thing my program actually does a really great job at, is they're taking these real life current events and they understand that me and everybody else, we're bringing that baggage in. They understand that. So it doesn't matter where we're at in our learning. They stopped and they addressed it, right? They addressed it. I actually can't remember if I was in school at that point. I think this was right before I started school. But we've had other, events that have happened since then, and they, right, like the election. Mm-hmm. The election, the people of color in my cohort, we were going through it. I was going through it. And they do a good job at validating that. Like, look, I know as a woman of color or this XYZ, this is going to make you feel some type of way, so we're going to address that, right? We didn't learn, right? And I had the option of not even coming to school that day if I wanted to, right? Speaking of the election, because this was when George Floyd died. It was right before I went to school, but I think they do a good job of just addressing that, and that's something that teachers like me also need to do in our classroom, right? If a black man was just murdered in the streets, like, my kids are bringing that baggage in with them. I can't just be like, all right, we're gonna learn math today. It's a hierarchy of needs, right? If that basic need is not being met, of just addressing the fact that somebody that looks like you was just murdered in the street for literally no reason, you're not gonna learn math from me today. So let's stop and talk about this. And it's the same thing, that the theories of learning still apply to adults like me. I'm not learning about how to teach kids math or ELA if I'm stressed out because somebody that looks like me just died in the streets, by the hands of another white person. Yeah. You have to address it. And I think my program does a really good job of doing that.
I mean, that's really inspiring. I think that goes back to the fundamentals of just being a human. I see that a lot when I'm, out, practicing psychology, the propensity that we have in this society to just keep going. Mm-hmm. And like, it really just like oversaturates ourselves with like trauma, especially for black people in this country, but also like for a lot of white people, I mean, all of white people in this country, to keep propelling yourself through life as if nothing happens, and then having this expectation that you have to bring yourself this. I remember when I was working, before I was doing psychology work, I was working for a company, and they had a motto that was, you had to bring, you have to be 100% present, 100%, give me 100%. And I would always challenge and push that, because on a psychological level, if I'm not there, then I'm never going to be able to give you that 100%. And especially when it comes to like involving myself with children or people, in society, especially, again, in the BIPOC community, you have to be able to have those conversations and be real and have real, reactions to what happens in society. We can't keep going on like nothing is happening. And I think that that's really, really cool that your program is, or revolutionary. I mean, I'm undercap it with cool, but like revolutionary that
No, totally.
your program is doing that.
Yeah, I want to touch on the point that you bring up. Not everybody can bring their 100% every day. I was an athlete in college, and that had its ups and downs, but my coaches would always say, like, if you can't bring your 100%, then bring 100% of what you can, right? If I can only give you 60% today, I'm giving you 100% of that 60%. And I think that's so important. And just, in America, we just get so caught up in like, go, 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 go. No, like if I'm going through it, I need to process those feelings, and then I can give you what I need to give you. But it doesn't work like that. If you're telling me, come on, get it together, let's go. No. Yeah. Right? And I just love that point, because it's the same with my kids. I know my kids rarely bring 100% every day. And when they do, sometimes I don't even like it, because they're like overhyped. They're like, let's go, Miss Roberson. I'm like, no, because rarely am I bringing my 100% when they're bringing their 100%, right? Like there's always going to be that imbalance, and that's fine. I would never expect my kids to bring 100% every day, but what you do need to do is you need to bring 100% of what you can offer me. So I like that point that you make, because it's unrealistic. Yeah. Nobody's bringing their 100% every single day. I probably bring my 100% once a month. Like, you'll see it when you see it. When I got 10 hours of sleep, I had my coffee this morning. That's when you get my 100%.
Yeah. I mean, and like you said, it's really a scale, like that 100%. I think even the words, what you can offer today, like I can offer my genuine experience of what just happened with the trauma of seeing George Floyd murdered, because that's a very humanistic thing that needs to be voiced.
Absolutely.
Tell me a little bit about, I want to change, and we actually are probably going to go back a little bit, but going back to like the statistics of kids learning reading and math. I was looking at statistics, and I'll bring them up in a second, but like the change of fluency in this nation and how important it is to be able to get kids in math and competent in learning in math, reading and math, and how that changes and progresses over time, and especially when it comes to race in this country.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the statistics. Like, I can't run you the numbers, but what I can tell you is a general overview. Reading skills, ELA skills are super important, and stats will show that if kids aren't up to grade level by third grade, their chances of dropping out of high school go up astronomically. So there's this big, huge push to get kids at grade level, especially in reading, by third grade, because obviously we don't want to see them drop out of high school, right? Yeah. The school to prison pipeline is a thing, right? And that's part of it. Right? If I am not doing my best as a teacher to get you to grade level, I'm pushing you in the margins, just like you have been pushed into the margins your entire life. Like, that's where you're going to end up, because that's how society functions. That's the systemic part of it, right? They want to see people like you and I in jail. Like, I mean, I don't know how to put it any other way. Like, that's how the systems run. So as a teacher, we have to push hard to get these kids who are furthest away from educational justice, which are Black boys, up to grade level by at least third grade, because stats show, right, that if they're not, like, their chances of dropping out of high school are very, very high. But yeah, that's really it. Like, giving you an explanation generally, that's just it, right? We got to get these kids to grade level by third grade, especially in reading, because in third grade, a switch happens, right? You go from learning to read in K2 to reading to learn. If you don't know how to read, right? And kids, that's a reality. If you don't know how to read to learn, you're not going to learn, right? And it's not the kid's fault. That is not on them. That's on the system 100%. But that's the big shift that you see in third grade, because you go from essentially being a little baby to now, okay, we're going to really get into these things, right? You got to learn you got to read to learn. Yeah.
And they carry the brunt of what they're actually like being able to comprehend at that point. Yeah. It's not as much, you get away from a little bit of that probably hand holding, a little bit closer of like instructing to like more of the independent. Yeah. I want to bring a little bit of those facts. So I was on USA Facts, so it's facts given by the U.S. Census. So right now in 4th grade, in 2019, there was 35% of the country is competent at reading, 35%. Of that 35%, there is only 18% that are competent of Black people. The breakdown, Native Americans are at 19%, Hispanic are at 23%, multicultural races, so 2 or more races by the census, 40%. White is at 45%. So that 18 to 45%, that's significant. And then even with math, we have, there's 41% competency with math overall for the whole nation. Of that 41, 20% Black, Native American, 23%, 27% for Hispanic, and then white is 52. Asian Pacific Islander is actually at 66, a little bit higher, but there's massive margins there.
It goes back to redlining.
Yeah.
Look, that is intentional. That data is not on accident, and that's a big I don't even feel like misconception is an understatement, because the system's built like this. At this point, it's ignorance. These people are trying to just ignore the fact that we've set it up like that. I am not surprised by those facts in the least bit, because when you tell people where you can and can't live, and then you tell them where you can and can't go to school, and then you fund school off of where they live, that's not. That's not surprising. It's not, because you're depriving them of the resources they need to be successful, right? And then say you want to go to another school. Nope, you can't, because you don't live there. You don't live there. And it's the same with indigenous people. What did we do to them when we came over? Shoved them onto reservations. Do you think we gave them the resources they needed to survive on those reservations? No. No. That is 100% on purpose. Yeah. I'm literally not shocked at all, and it's awful.
It's there's not even really a word to be able to describe it, because that really pertains to the wealth, generational wealth that is accumulated, being able to get a good job, being able to go, like you said, go to college and be able to actually gain, economic status to be able to get out of the places that we're in. And that's obviously, again, why there is such huge redlining clusters regionally across this nation, because you can't get out of it. It's impossible really to get out of it. Only 13% of the nation has access to higher education, and of that 13%, it's very, very low where people of color are within that.
It's ridiculous. It's literally awful. And like I said, we're starting so far behind the start line. I'm having to sprint times 10 to catch up where my white peer is, right? They're walking. They're walking through life. Sorry. The system's set up to make them successful. Right. It's easy. It's easy for them. You're walking your way through K-12. You walked your way through undergrad. If you want to go to grad school, I'm sure it's easy for you, right?
Right.
It's all intentional, and that's one of the biggest flaws in our society, is we don't see these systems as intentional. We walk through life thinking we're doing the right thing, right? The system could not be flawed. That's the idea from most people. At the end of the day, we're all humans. We are all humans. The system is 100% flawed, and it's set up on purpose to make people that look like you and I fail. That's just how it is.
Yeah. That's something that you don't learn in school. No. And I think that's part of the problem that exacerbates this issue, is that when it comes to a lot of white culture learning these things, it comes from after. It comes in either higher education, or it comes from someone that's in the BIPOC community, letting them know about it, and then it becomes instant, I haven't learned this my whole entire life, and I'm gonna reject this truth that's happening right now. And it's important for white people to know that it's not their problem to, like, if you're a white kid and you grew up in a privileged neighborhood, like, you're not inherently guilty for having the privilege that you do. But understand that it is your responsibility to be able to make the world a better place and be able to reach out and be able to give resources, to be able to at least acknowledge the system that is happening,
right?
And understand that that the more that we don't talk about this and we don't change it in some way, right, you are very much just exacerbating that issue, that systemic, right, ignorance.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, I don't know, that is one thing that is super frustrating as a woman of color, is this whole idea of white guilt. Just stop. Just stop. Like, obviously, you didn't set up this system alone by yourself. Like, white people, stop saying that. I understand, but I also didn't set up this system. My ancestors didn't set up this system. Yours did. And unfortunately, they're not here to correct it, so you have to. Like, we have to get past this whole idea of, oh, I feel so guilty, poor me, woe's me. Stop, because even as an educator, like, what is that doing to help your kids? What is that doing to help society? You feeling bad for yourself? And I'm sorry, like, I'm a blunt person, but that's just how it is. Like, I, as a Black woman, you as a Black man, we can sit here, we can talk on this podcast, we can, talk about our experiences, what we need to do to get us as a society to where we need to be. But at the end of the day, we don't hold the power.
Yeah.
And that's just it. The white people have to understand that you hold power. Like, just socially, you hold power, right? It's societally, you hold power because the system is built for you. It's not built for me. I could sit here and talk till I'm blue in the face, but until you, white person, get a move on and start to fix things to better society for people that look like you and I, it's not going to work. We're not going to get there. We have to have those white people hop on with us. Like, that's just how it is.
Yeah, that's something that I will get into on another episode of the podcast. But I think that it's important to note even here, like, the ideology of white privilege, for some reason in this country, I think it's designed, but the way that is looked at and perceived in white society implicates like a denotion of guilt, but it shouldn't be that. In every other breakdown of the way that we look at privilege is actually like a positive word. It's a very positive word. Look it up in the dictionary. It's an honor. There's all these different things. It's a privilege and an honor to be able to serve. That's what a lot of, people in the military talk about. Right. It's a privilege to serve my country. But when you have white privilege, for some reason, there is this extra bag that comes with it that denotes, like, I don't want to have anything to do with it. I'm guilty, and that's not what's happening.
People just don't understand what it means to have white privilege. One is because you can't really see it, right? Like, if you serve in the military, I can see your uniform. I know, like, there's documentation of you doing that, right? If I grew up with privilege in terms of wealth, right? I can see that. People don't understand white privilege because they can't see it, for lack of a better term. I don't know, when you can't see something, it's easy to just be like, it doesn't exist. Also, because white supremacy is so just weaved in the fabrics of our society, that adds to it, right? If you're white, you've had white privilege your entire life. It's like a fish doesn't know they're in water, right? Cliche, but that's just how it is. But me as a Black woman, I'm getting treated, I have that experience of being treated differently than you. I live it. I can see your white privilege, but because you can't and you hold societal power, you think it's not a thing. People are and it is nuanced. It is. I don't want to say it's hard to understand because I really don't think it is. But like, I guess if you've lived it, if you have walked through life with this privilege, because of the color of your skin, it might be hard for you to understand. It's pretty nuanced, and you would have to actually sit down and read about it, or, you know, whatever your mode of learning is. But then you have to be open-minded enough to be like, okay, maybe I am experiencing these things. Americans are ignorant. They don't want, first of all, any shift in power. That is a big no-no here, right? So if you're reading about your white privilege and I'm telling you that you have this privilege based on the color of your skin that you can't control, that's giving you a one-up over somebody that looks like me, oh, no. Like, that is the number one reaction I get from white people. No. I'm like, well, yes, but okay. You know, you have to be willing to receive that type of information to understand it. That's the number one barrier there. These people just don't even want to understand it. Okay, well, if you don't want to understand it, then get out of my face, right? Like, that's not helping.
Yeah. I mean, on that same line, I'm interested because I think that part of the problem here, I mean, as you're talking about, is education, right? Going back to what the subject at hand.
Right.
Like, and is your program designed, I think that obviously this is a big question. I think that there's a time and a place for both things, but like, I think there's a time and a place to be able to support, you know, the BIPOC community with education,
right.
Give resources. That's a huge thing. But I think that there's also this other, you know, huge problem of like educating white people. And it's obviously convoluted because it's not of the BIPOC community's responsibility to teach the white community. This podcast is one of those resources that is available.
Right.
But like, is your program designed for white teachers to teach their peers and also like white children about racism?
No. So this is an issue I have with my program is I feel like it is very much, let me back up. It is catered to educating white people, which is what we need. That's what we're sitting here talking about, right? Because I'm not doing it. I don't care. Figure it out, right? So, yes, it does cater to white people and their identity development in terms of what it looks like to walk on this earth as a white person, which I think is great. Could they be doing it better? Yes. My undergrad experience at UW was unmatched. Like, I learned so much about the world, about myself, about education in undergrad. And then I was expecting the same as a master's student to continue that education on. And I feel like because I did the work as a Black woman, just walking through life, having those experiences and then doing it in undergrad, I lost my train of thought. Anyway, what I thought I was going to continue my education. And I have all this experience. I know I want to be challenged, but what I'm finding in my program is it is so tailored to getting these white people up to speed with my experiences, that I'm losing a lot of educational value in what I could be learning. I feel like I've been super stagnant this year because I've been waiting for these white people to catch up to me. They're just now learning, literally, like, we were talking about microaggressions, right? They're just now learning like what that is. And I understand, so I had a conversation with the recruitment manager. I was like, look, like, why are there no prereqs for this program? Because, so there's kind of like twin programs at UW to get your teaching certificate. You have STR, which is what I'm in, and then you have the traditional LTEP, which is just, you 6 weeks student teaching, you learn theories, whatever. For LTEP, I applied, right? And you had to have a ton of prereqs for that. And so I asked our recruitment manager, I'm like, what's going on here? Like, because my learning has been so stagnant, because I'm waiting for these people to just learn what a microaggression is, I'm waiting for you to understand fully what I'm going through as I walk out of my door every day. Like, I'm not learning anything. Aside from the how to physically teach, I haven't really learned much more in terms of identity development or race relations, right? And I asked him, I was like, what is going on here? And he was like, well, we don't want prereqs to be a barrier into this program, which I totally understand, right? Like,
but a barrier for whom, I guess, is that question.
Everyone, right? They don't want, even as a Black person, they don't, they don't want essentially they don't want it to be a barrier, right? Because classes cost money. If you can't afford to do that, right? My program's $30,000 a year, right? You're already paying to be in this program. We don't want prereqs to be another barrier that you have to jump over. And I know that ideology is, they had that in mind to help BIPOC people, right? Because systematically we're so just behind everybody. I can't even find words to describe it. But in turn, people like me, I don't feel like I'm getting the full education that I could be getting because I'm waiting for these white people to catch up. Right. It's kind of backfiring, right? Okay, you took away this barrier, but now you're letting in more white people who don't know. They don't, and I have a lot of career changers in my program. So I don't know, we have social workers, union workers, random people, I don't know, So I think that's another flaw too. I think if you're going to be working with kids, you should show some sort of history with working with kids. You know what I mean? Working with kids.
Right.
So that in and of itself, I think it backfires.
Yeah.
Because if you don't know about yourself as a white person, like just what we were talking about the other day, 10 minutes ago, if you don't know, how are you going to serve these kids? So you got to pick your battle, right? Do you want to not have barriers and then you get kind of run-of-the-mill type people potentially? Or can we add prereqs and we'll make sure we're getting the people we want?
Yeah, it almost sounds like there's not to critique the program, but to critique it. Yeah, critique the program as well. But it almost seems like there should be not necessarily an assessment, but some sort of either assessment or acknowledgement that this program is going to teach you a basis of your identity as a white person.
Right.
But black people, we understand that you have lived this your whole entire life. And because I have experienced that as well, going through different cultural classes.
Right.
I'm sitting there and I'm I didn't even have to read the textbook because I know all the stuff that's in here already. I've lived it.
Yep.
That's not necessarily an insult to white people. It's just I've lived it.
It's just a fact.
Again, this is part of that white privilege of understanding. If you got to pick up a book, it's not a bad thing to pick up a book. It's an extra book. That's fine.
Right.
But we have had to take these extra steps to be able to even get to where we are in society to function. Right. And for you to have to be able to take an extra step here, it's an honor. It should be an honor to do so, to be able to be an effective teacher, especially in these, systemically racist systems of education.
Right.
Yeah.
No, that's a good point. And I brought this up too. Like I said, I understand not wanting to have that barrier. Awesome. Don't have the barrier. But why, again, it's a system, right? Then if you're not going to have this barrier, then why am I suffering because these white people don't want to put in the work? Okay, then put me in a separate group with people who do. That's your job. And that's a huge part of teaching is differentiation. Right. Okay, and that's all. They want to sit there till they're blue in the face and tell differentiate, right? And I'm not discounting that. It's obviously a huge part of teaching. Okay, but teaching and learning happens pretty much the same for adults and children. So, okay, and on top of that, it's a waste of money. I've been stagnant in my identity development for a year, within this program. Anyway, but that's just it. Okay, put me in a group with people who are at my level. And that's, again, it's not an insult. Just like you said, it's not an insult to anybody. It's just a fact. You're here, I'm here. And it's not even that I'm above you or below. It's just, we're on different planes right now. So my professors need to differentiate to get us together, Mm-hmm. And it's not an insult on the program. I think STR is fine. I think their intentions are in the right place. Is it perfect? No. But right. It just plays into this system that we're talking about, right? Me, again, as a black woman, I'm having to wait on these white people. I've done that my entire life. That's not why I came to STR. It's not why. It's not why I'm an educator. So figure it out.
Yeah. That places a lot of responsibility on the institution, mm-hmm. which is, I think that's the somewhat ironic and hypocritical thing about this whole system of change. Mm-hmm. As an institution, yes, you're going to make revenue off of having these systems that are, again, anti-racist. Mm-hmm. It's you see this a lot with even an organization that I'm attached to right now. In my psychology program, they were doing this anti-racist teaching, and it's great. and like you can attract people because it's a new thing, and we're a very trend-based society in America. But like as an institution, if you're not ready to dig in, and also like you're talking about economics, right? Of like it's more expensive if I don't wait, if I charge you for these prerequisite classes. Okay, as an institution, if you're being anti-racist, how about you waive the charge
right.
to be able to get these people into this program to learn these fundamental things, because it's more important. Right. But again, we go back to one of the systemically racist parts of this country, and the way that economics works is that we're a capitalist society. We love money more than anything. We honor money more than than anything. So as an institution, I think the challenge is, what are you going to do? So I think that's a very valid point.
Yeah, totally.
I want to ask, as a black male in society, again, there's a difference in my experience. Right. As your, from your experience as a black woman, what can, and also for all of white society, and differences there. And I don't want to put you on the spot, but like I think it's important to have the conversation of like, what can we do to be able to come alongside women that are educators, teachers, to be able to support and like kind of get on the same plane there.
Again, loaded question. A lot of things, society's built on hierarchies, right? So you're not really much above me on the ladder, you know? But I think just be there. Just be there. And I think for me, personally, the biggest thing is stand up for black women. Just stand up. Like, black women are the target of so much just crap in society, and if you hear that, if you hear that, just say something. Like, what are you talking about? Do you know how much I would have loved for somebody to stand up for me when people would tell me, oh, you're pretty for a black girl, or, oh, I don't date black women, just like stuff like that. Like, it would have meant the world to me if somebody was like, why did you just say that? It's as simple as that. Why did you just say that? Right? And I'm a big advocate for critical thinking. That's another huge teaching philosophy of mine, right? Get people to critically think about what they just said to you, right? That's what you guys can do. No, it's not even just you, right? Like, we're the low man on the totem pole, unfortunately. This is, you can do these things. Is it going to carry as much weight as if a white man? Imagine this: if a white man stood up for a black woman. You know how powerful that is? It's a simple idea, but it's so powerful. Like, the person who holds the most power in society standing up for the person who holds the least power, that's going to create change. And it's as simple as that, right? Get them to think about what they just said. Why did you just say that? They're going to feel dumb, and they might get mad. But you know what I've also learned is people always think about what you say. Even if they're defensive in the moment, they'll be like, oh, I didn't say anything. What do you mean? They're going to go home and think about it. That's just it. So stand up for your people. And, I'm not perfect at this either. I should stand up for my people a lot more than I do. And it's hard. I'm not saying it's easy. And this is another conversation that I have with the white people in my cohort in terms of putting in the work. This is part of putting in the work and your identity development is it's uncomfortable. After George Floyd died, I was severely depressed for a couple months. I was also going through a breakup, which also ties into all of it, right? Like, my ex-boyfriend told me he couldn't post for me. He couldn't post for Black Lives Matter because baseball scouts follow him.
He was a white man.
Yeah, he was white.
Yeah.
So it's things like that. Like, why did nobody stand up for me in that instance? His parents. Why did his parents not tell him, you cannot say that to people? You know what I mean? But anyway, so doing the work is uncomfortable. What I'm trying to say is, even as a black woman, I have to do the work as well, because there's people who don't look like me who are also marginalized, right? We can look at the indigenous communities. They are down bad. Like, they have it bad, right? I have to do the work to understand what they're going through, right? Even as a black woman. For white people, that's much more exaggerated because they have to understand so much more. And it's uncomfortable. I always tell the white people in my cohort, because they think they're doing the work and they're not. I'm just gonna put it out there. And they know, because I tell them, you think you're doing the work and you're not. If you're doing the work, you should be feeling some type of way. You should be crying. You should feel guilty. You might be a little depressed. You will have anxiety because it's hard. My mom is a white woman. After George Floyd died, she did a ton of personal work. And she told me, and we have this type of relationship where I don't mind if she tells me these things. It could be perceived as a burden for, other people. But she told me, I've cried myself to sleep so many nights thinking about, reflecting on the things I've said to you, or, what you've been through and I didn't address. That's doing the work. You should be crying, bare minimum. I cried for months after George Floyd died, for months. Right, for a different reason than white people. But if you're doing the work, it's uncomfortable. If you're not uncomfortable, you're not doing the work.
Yeah. Legitimizing and normalizing the power that comes from being uncomfortable. I think that we have the propensity in society to not, stay in that power. But we don't understand that everything that we do where we learn is uncomfortable. Growing pains. When we're a kid, every kid has growing pains and knows what that feels like. But for some reason, when it comes to our minds, crafting our minds to overcome these things, such as racism,
right.
For white society, that idea is too grand of an idea,
right.
to be able to sit in that uncomfortable feeling,
right.
Even though you were literally birthed
right.
from a position of being uncomfortable, as
right.
vis-a-vis your mom being
right.
uncomfortable in birthing you,
right?
It's the revolutionary power in being uncomfortable. It's how the world runs.
And I think that in general, and I'm not trying to sit here and bag on white people. It's literally just how it is. They don't understand how far they have to come to even have a inkling of a perception of what I go through on a daily basis, right? Because I can sit here, I have 23 years of experience.
Yeah.
They don't have that. They have to figure it out. They have to figure out how to get that 23 years of experience without having lived it. And that's not an excuse. They need to do it. You need to do it. And especially as an educator, you need to do it, because your kids are coming in with anywhere between 5 years and 10 years, 11 years as a elementary school teacher of experience. In my program, I guess I should have said this. Sorry, I keep messing with these little cords. My program, we have to teach in Title I schools in the Seattle Public School District. So what it means to be Title I is it means at least 40% of your kids are on free and reduced lunch. And we know systemically, historically, those kids are going to be majority kids of color, just because of how the system's set up. So as a white educator, you have to do that work. There is no excuse. You are walking into a school that's pretty much 50% free and reduced lunch, and you're gonna have higher percentages of kids of color than that in your class, in your school. You have to do the work. Because going back to relationship building, how do you build relationships with kids you don't know?
Yeah.
You don't know how do you build relationships with kids that you don't know what they're going through?
Yeah, you have to be able to empathize with their position.
It's bare minimum. You have to.
Yeah.
And you have to put yourself in their communities. That's another part of doing the work, and we learn a lot about this in teaching school. Put yourself in their communities. So many teachers, me included, don't live in the communities in which they work.
Right.
That's a huge thing. If you don't even know what streets your kids walk, how am I going to teach you? That's another way of adapting the curriculum, right? Bring in real life experiences. How do I bring in real life experiences if I don't know?
Yeah.
And you as a white person, it's hard. It's going to be so much harder than it is for me.
Yeah, I think it's really insightful. Really, really insightful. I've been taking a lot of your time. I don't want to take too much.
I can talk forever about this.
I think I would just ask for maybe a couple things, just really kind of out there, kind of poignant. What can white educators do? What can we do as a nation to change the way that we educate our children? To embody empathy, to embody, the different experiences of different gendered people, of different racially, identifying people, because it's all interwoven in. But what can we do?
Listen to people who have actually lived experience. Listen. Another big teaching philosophy of mine is I'm not the only holder of knowledge in the classroom. I'm the teacher. I am the authority figure. I need to provide structure, but that's really it. You know what I mean? And I guess I'll teach you the core subjects. But here's the thing. You need to listen to these people who have lived experiences. If you're trying to teach a lesson on systemic racism, why don't you ask your kids how they feel when they walk out in the street and they don't see anybody that looks like them? You know what I mean? You have to position your students as teachers, and you have to position yourself as a learner. And that's just, that's helpful in the broader context of life, right? And that's another thing. Americans are just so ignorant. Everybody walks through life, they're like, I know this and that and that. But why don't you just be quiet for a second? You listen to other people.
Yeah.
If I myself as a teacher, I'm vulnerable to that, and I show my kids, no, I want to know about a day in the life of you, right? They're going to go out and they're going to want to know about a day in the life of somebody else, right? That in and of itself is going to start to very slowly reverse these white supremacy ideals. So just listen, position yourself as a learner. Because that's what you are. That's how life is. We're all teachers, we're all learners. And I think the more you can let that be known to your kids, the better, right? Everybody is an expert in at least one area of their life, right? I was a gymnast for 16 years. I'm an expert in that, right? But one of my kids might play baseball. I don't know anything about baseball, right? We're both athletes. I can sit there and be like, well, I was an athlete, I know this and that, which is things you will hear throughout life, right? Well, I did this, so I know about XYZ. No, be quiet and listen, right? You're an expert on baseball. Jimmy, tell me about baseball, right? It's as simple as that. And when you build those relationships, then you can start to have more serious conversations, right? Jimmy, tell me about your experiences being a Black man living in Seattle. You can have these conversations with young kids. My fifth graders, kids want to talk about this. So let them talk. That's what you can do as a white educator. Let them talk and literally just be quiet. Just shut up and listen to them. And listen to your Black colleagues, your BIPOC colleagues.
Yeah. The power of sometimes just being able to, as an illustration, bending the knee and just being able to listen. I think it's interesting that we've gone our whole lives being conditioned to learn, but the importance of humanistic learning. We learn all about math, you can learn about reading, you can learn about writing, you can learn about, chemistry, calculus, whatever it may be. Right. But learning how to be a human, this is a struggle in America.
Oh, it is such a big struggle.
It's at the heart of what systemic racism is, because we have to rewire. For white people, you have to recondition yourselves to let go of the things like redlining, like segregated ideology, and to understand that there is more of a world outside.
Yep.
And to, like I said, bend the knee and understand that education is something you're gonna have to learn your whole entire life.
It's critical thinking. That's what it is. If you can't, I'll bring this up because I was one of my short-lived experiences as an educator. This was one of my favorite moments as an educator is thinking about critical thinking, right? I was teaching a lesson it was some dumb curricular lesson on comparing articles. I don't know, it was really boring. And one of the articles was, it was arguing for why we should have segregated schools based on sex, right? We should have all girls schools, all boys schools. And, that content aside, whatever, it was dumb. But I had a kid raise their hand and they were like, oh, well, Miss Roberson, not everybody identifies as a girl or a boy, so that wouldn't work.
Absolutely.
Nothing to do with the lesson. Nothing. But that's critical thinking skills at work right there, right? And I was like, okay. And as an educator, I have two options at that point, right? And A traditional educator might be like, yeah, you're right, but let's get back on track, or what? Okay, because that wasn't the point of the lesson. It really wasn't. But so I have that option. I can stick with the lesson plan, or I have another option. I can continue to foster their critical thinking skills. Tell me more about that. Tell me more. Kids want to talk about these things. They told me, we had a whole 20-minute discussion on what it means to identify as a girl or a boy, what that looks like. You know what I mean? And they were like, no, it doesn't. They were like, and then it led to a conversation of, well, who's this author? That's critical thinking. Think about it. Who wrote this, right? And you have to walk through life. Okay, who made up this system that we're in? Who's it benefiting? Who's it hurting? Right? And that was one of my most proud moments as an educator, because it went from, well, Miss Roberson, like not everybody identifies as a girl or a boy, to tell me more, to who wrote this article. Those are valuable life skills that those kids are going to remember. They don't care. They're not going to remember, I don't even remember the objective of what I was teaching. And guess what? They weren't going to remember it either, but they're going to remember that conversation. And they're going to remember the fact that they were able to question text, right? This was professionally written by people who have PhDs. And you're telling me my 11-year-old class is going to sit there and flame you? Absolutely. That's why I'm an educator.
Yeah, shifting the hegemonic, power structures.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, wow. It's been an absolute honor to be able to sit with you and learn about, everything you're going through. Seeing, what you're doing makes me very, very encouraged about our society, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It was fun. And you too, this is amazing that you do this and you're getting the word out there, right? And you're giving people like me an opportunity to just rant for an hour straight, right? But no, it was fun. This was fun. Thanks for having me. I'll be back anytime. Maybe we could do this again in 2 years after I've, had a few years under my belt with my own classroom. But
yeah, I would love it. Yeah. I would absolutely love it. And to the Race Relations family, please comment if you do want Ebony back. I mean, ask some good questions. Let's get into it. I get into the more nuances of what you want to what you want to know, what education is all about. And follow us at Race Relations Podcast on Instagram, and also follow us on our website, www.racerelationspodcast.com. Thank you.